Hello, everybody. Hi, welcome to another live stream. Lara from Complete Test Success here. Today we are focusing on Academic IELTS Writing Task 1. And it's pretty much the same as we always do. I'm going to show you a question. I'm going to get you to write various parts of the answer and share it with me. And then I can give you feedback. I'll show you what your mistakes are. And then, of course, based on those mistakes, you will know how to improve your scores. And that's pretty much how it's going to work here. Let me just make sure that the software is working. I'll just quickly check on YouTube and Facebook here. Okay, looks good. We're good to go. Hi, Rasif. Welcome to the lesson. Good to see you here. So, as with every task 1 question, as with every IELTS writing question, we start by writing the paraphrase. So the paraphrase is where we take the topic at the top of the question and we rewrite that in our own words. So let me share the question with you here. This is the question. And at the top, you can see where it says, and I'll just highlight it for you guys here. The table below shows the number of students at a primary school and a secondary school in Malaysia in 2005. And the charts show survey results of what these students' favorite sport was. Okay, so that's what you want to do, is paraphrase that. So I'm going to give you guys a chance to paraphrase that, then share it with me in the comments, and I'll have some feedback for you on, anything you're doing wrong so that you can improve, or if the quality is good enough and you're already to the standard that you can get a good score. Yep. So that's the first task. Write a paraphrase for that question and share it with me in the comments. I'll just try and make it a little bit bigger for you now. And just while I'm waiting for you guys to share your paraphrase, I'm also just want to tell you about my free live feedback lessons on Zoom. So those are my free group classes on Zoom every week. And to join those, you just need to click on the link here in the comments, or you'll find the same link in the video description. And once you sign up, you will see all the various topics of the lessons, the times, and the link to join the Zoom lesson. So click on that link and sign up. And I also have one-on-one support. So for those of you who are struggling to pass the test, maybe you failed the test a few times and you're not sure why. If you need one-on-one support, there's the link to find those materials there. Okay, so we have our first paraphrase from Selen. The pie charts give information about the proportion of students at secondary school and primary school in Malaysia in the year 2005. Proportion would be like the size of the total. So the proportion would be, like the percentages that we see in the pie chart. Those are proportions. So proportion wouldn't be the right word. And also, you have only paraphrased the first part of the question. We need to paraphrase the first part and the second part. Hi, Dilshad. Thanks for joining us here. Hi, Abdus. Welcome to the lesson. Okay, here's Ruth. Hi, Ruth. The given table and charts illustrate the total number of students in Malaysia and the total number of activities students enjoyed. No, it doesn't give the total number of students in Malaysia. It gives the total number of students in one primary school and one secondary school. So that information is inaccurate. And that's one of the main things you need to be careful with in the paraphrase. It has to have the same meaning. That's very, very important. More important than changing the vocab is that it has the same meaning. So be careful with that. Then you said, and the total number of activities. It's not about the total number of activities. We might have all the students playing all of these sports, or we might have all of the students playing none of these sports. But what they're saying is what their favorite sport is. So that, again, isn't accurate. So be really careful with that. Hi, Rocky. I'm a beginner of academic IELTS. Hence, where could I start and how can I start writing task practice in task 1 and 2? So what you could do is start by learning what to do. So when the students join my course, what I'll do first is I'll have a video lesson to show them what to do, and then I'll get them to practice it, and then I'll give them feedback on what they've written. And that's a very good strategy, and show you what to do, get you to try it, give you feedback, and then just continue with that cycle. So how can you start? You'll have to start by learning what to do. So, find a website that you feel is reliable. Of course, I'm going to recommend my own, but it's not the only one. And go through their materials and follow their advice as to, what information to put in the essay, what way to structure the essay, and whatever other advice they'll have. So start by learning what to do. And once you understand the requirements, then you can start to practice. And, practicing by yourself is fine for a while because you'll be able to see your own mistakes and you'll be able to kind of get a feel for what you need to do. So practicing by yourself is definitely good for a while. And for some people, practicing by themselves will be enough to get their scores. But then for other people, they'll do that and they still won't achieve their scores. And if that's happening, then that's the point where you start it, where you would need feedback on your writing so that you understand your mistakes. Hi, Mandeep. Shakshi, the two pie charts delineate the number of its blur. I can't see clearly. Let me have a quick check, make sure I don't have the same problem. So it's probably low resolution on your device. The YouTube software automatically reduces the resolution if you've got a slow internet speed. So it's probably that is the problem at the moment. I have no warnings about the internet speed on my side, so I would guess that's the problem. Hi, Dilshad. The pie charts give information on the number of students recorded at primary and secondary schools in Malaysia in 2005. Not quite. It doesn't have the same meaning. So it's not the pie charts that show the number. It's the table that shows the number. And also, it's not the number of students at primary and secondary schools. In the question, it says a primary school and a secondary school. So that just means one primary school and one secondary school. So the language itself is good, but the information isn't the same as the question. So it's not appropriate. Okay, guys, I'm just going to give you 2 more minutes. If we don't find an appropriate paraphrase from the students who are here, what I'll do is I'll share a paraphrase that I have written already, one that I wrote previously. Okay, so don't seem to have any more students sharing their paraphrase. So let me just share one I have with you here. Okay, so the table illustrates how many students were in a Malaysian primary school, in a Malaysian primary and secondary school during 2005, while the pie charts indicate the sports these students liked best. Now, what you'll notice is in this paraphrase, I'm not changing every word. I'm changing some words, but not every word. So here we have the table, students, primary, secondary, sports. So what you find, like with a lot of candidates, they're afraid to use the same words from the question. They feel like they have to change everything, and that generally results in a paraphrase that is either unclear, or, as we saw with most of the examples from the students here today, a paraphrase where the meaning is different, and neither of those is a good outcome. So more important than changing the words is it's clear and it has the same meaning. After that, of course, if you can change some of the language, that's a benefit, but not the most important aspect of writing a paraphrase. Okay, so from there, let's move on to the next part of the essay. And here we need to write the overview. This is obviously going to take a little bit of time. So I'm just going to let you write your overviews. I don't want to give you more instructions. I've made lots of videos about how to write essays already. So rather than me reteaching you, you can go and look at those videos on my channel. But what I want to do is just let you have a go, and whatever mistakes you make will show you the problems you need to avoid in future. So don't worry if you're making mistakes. Instead of me guiding you very carefully and holding your hand, I'm going to just let you have a go, let you try to write the overview, find out what mistakes you're making, and then we can talk about how to improve. Okay, so that's the goal for now. Write your overview and share it with me in the comments. Fidelis, hello to you. Welcome to the lesson. Hi, Cameron. Hi, Leo. Okay, here's another paraphrase. Dilshad. The table illustrates how many Malaysian students attended 2 modes of school in the year 2005. A mode of school isn't right. You could have said 2 schools would have been okay. And then the pie chart. So there are 2 pie charts, so that has to be plural. The pie charts in plural give data about the ratio of favorite types of sport in that time frame. Let's say in those schools in that time frame. But yeah, this is the best paraphrase we've seen so far. Good job. And hi, pause. The pie charts give information about some activities of the number of pupils of both primary and secondary school in Malaysia in 2005. You've tried to paraphrase, but it's not clear. The pie charts give information about some activities. So, you're trying. What's clear here, and it's a very common mistake, I already mentioned it, is you're trying desperately not to use the word sport because the word sport is in the question. But if you're talking about sport, then the best word to use is sport. It's much, much clearer than some activities. Some activities, obviously that's a much wider range and it's unclear. So don't be afraid to use the word from the question if you don't know an appropriate synonym. And like in the paraphrase that I showed you, I use the same word. It's not a bad thing to do. So yeah, don't try so much to avoid using words from the question. And as well as that, what we're looking at is you haven't said that it's what type of information. The information is about, which sport was the favorite of these students, which was their favorite sport. And the last thing then is you didn't include the table, the information about the table in your paraphrase. So you would need to paraphrase all the information from the question. It would need to have the same meaning, and don't worry about copying words from the question. Hi, Domenico. Good to see you here. Pause, you're very welcome. No problem at all. Okay, so I'll let you get on with your overviews. Once the first students start sharing their overview, we'll start looking at those. Okay, here's a paraphrase from Domenico. Got some problems with spaces here today, which isn't typical of you, Domenico. So maybe you're on a phone or something, but definitely punctuation problems here. So the table provides information about how many students attended, so it has to be past tense, a primary and secondary school, while the two pie charts illustrate the ratio of preferred sport activities, just sports is better, chosen by students in the two schools. Good. Yep. So just a few vocab and grammar mistakes. You need a full stop at the end of that sentence as well. Good job, but just be careful with the vocab and the grammar. But the meaning is the same, and it's clear and it has the same meaning. So those are the most important things. So you've achieved that. Just need to work on the vocab and the grammar a little bit there. I lack spaces. You did indeed. Yeah. But I don't think that's an ongoing problem. I've seen your writing a lot, and that's not typical. So not something I would worry about this time. Ran out of space. Very good. Okay, the table and pie charts in combination show how many students studied at primary and secondary schools in Malaysia. So it said a primary and a secondary school. Granted, that's an incredibly big primary and an incredibly big secondary school, but we have to follow what the question says. So the question said a, meaning one of each, not all the schools in the country, and what sports were favored by them. So yeah, that's the second part is good. In the introduction, can I talk about two charts in separate sentences instead of using while? Absolutely, yeah, of course. That's what happened in the question. So yeah, absolutely. If that's what you want to do, Chung, of course. No problem. Okay, so we have the first overview here from Dilshad, but I need to do a little bit of analysis here myself first. So if you've been following me for a while, you'll know that I'm quite keen on drawing on the questions for my overviews. So basically, first of all, I want to compare these two. So which one was higher? So the secondary school was higher here. And now if I look at the primary school, I want to see which is the most popular of the sports. So the highest one is yellow here. So that's tennis. So tennis is the most popular. And the least popular, then the lowest is 5% here, which is rugby. Okay, and then when we look at the secondary school here, the highest is the red one. So that's football is the most popular in the secondary school. And lowest is both of these here. So with both of these at 5%. So swimming and rugby are equally low. So that's potentially what I could include in my overview. The highest from the table, the highest from the primary school chart, and the highest from the secondary school chart. What you don't want to do, and I have a feeling that some students might make this mistake, is to start comparing. So if you start going 15% here and 35% here and comparing, you know, the 15% with the 35%, you're going to make things more complicated. And there are different number of students, so that you know, we can talk about which was the most and least popular, but I think you're going to make it too confusing if you try to compare the percentages in each chart. So kind of be careful with that. Make sure you understand what you're trying to do. Okay. So with that, let me go and have a look at the first paraphrase here, or the first overview. Overall, it is clear that more students went to, and here we would say the secondary school than the primary school during the period shown. Furthermore, tennis was the most favored type of sport in the primary school. Good. While for the secondary school, it is true for football. The language isn't correct. It is true for football, but the information is perfect. So I actually really like this overview. I'm just going to copy and paste this onto the screen here. So you've done a really good job of choosing the appropriate information. And for the most part, you've communicated it very clearly, but there was just that one little bit at the end, the it is true for, that doesn't communicate it. It's still easy to understand. It's just not accurate. It's not that I don't understand, or I don't think anybody would be confused about what you're saying, but it's just not, the language itself isn't right. Okay. So here we go. All right. So overall, it is clear that more students went to, and we need the secondary school than the primary school during the period shown. Furthermore, we need a small t for tennis. Tennis was by far the most, we wouldn't say the most favorite type of sport. We would just say by far the favorite type of sport, like this. The favorite type of sport, or we could say the most favored type of sport, but favorite is kind of the easiest way to say it. So what's by far the favorite type of sport in, and again, the primary school. Now, why are we saying the primary school? Because we've already spoken about it in the paraphrase, so we don't need to repeat it here. We don't need to repeat it. The reader already knows what primary school we're talking about. We're talking about the primary school that we mentioned in our paraphrase back here. So the reader knows we're talking about a primary school. So this time, whenever we're talking about the secondary school, the primary school, it's because the reader knows it's the one we already mentioned in the previous part of the essay. While for the secondary school, it is, you know what? It is football. That's fine. Now, the one more thing, the information is for 2005, so that has to be in the past. And that's our overview. Perfect. That's great. Okay. So with the overview written, that brings us to the next part of our essay. And we need to write the body paragraphs. But what I'm interested in at the moment is, how do you think we should organize our details paragraphs or our body paragraphs? So we're going to write 2 paragraphs. What I'd like you to tell me before we start, because I want everybody to be, on the same page, what information do you think we should put in the first body paragraph or the first details paragraph? Same thing. What should we put in the first one? What should we put in the second one? So share that with me in the comments. And from there, then we will we'll have a go. I'll get you to have a go and I'll give you feedback. Leongina, sir, please make detailed video on pie chart and bar chart. So the type of chart doesn't really matter whether you get a pie chart or a bar chart or a table. What matters is how many points in time are shown in the chart. So this one is all based on 2005. So we're looking at the highest and lowest values in our overview. But if it was based on 2 years, like 2005 and 2008, we would be comparing those, and then we would talk about which categories increased and which decreased. So that's really the only difference. But if you take a look at the videos I've already made and published on YouTube, and you'll see how to answer all of those. So I've covered that information already. But the basics is that you will not change your approach depending on the type of chart. Hi, Mandeep. The table displays the number of pupils at a primary school and at a secondary school in Malaysia in 2008. Now, you're going to end up with a band 5 for task achievement. No, a band 6 for task achievement, because you said 2008 when the question said 2005. So that one small little mistake is enough to stop you getting a high task achievement score. Well, band 6 is a high task achievement score, but it'll stop you getting a higher task achievement score. So there's nothing you can do to recover from that. One small mistake like that means band 6. While the bar chart illustrates those pupils' favorite sports. So actually a very well written paraphrase, but the information was wrong. The other thing then you need to be careful with is your punctuation. So you're making mistakes with spaces, capital letters, full stops, and commas. So punctuation is definitely something for you to work on, Mandeep. Okay, so we have another overview here. Sakshi, overall, it can be manifested. No. It can be seen, but you don't even need to say that. You can just go overall, the percentage for football was the same in both primary school and secondary school, and tennis was the most favorite in primary school among the all other. So you're not comparing like with like here, and you need to include something about the table as well. So you've ignored the table. The fact that, what did you say? Football has the same percentage. Is that right? Football is red, 30 and 40. They're not the same percentage, but to be honest, even if they were, that wouldn't be a significant piece of information. So I wouldn't include that. It's wrong, but also not what you should focus on. So look more at the highest and lowest values. Tennis was the most favorite sport in the primary school among all other sports. Likewise, rugby was the most favorite in the secondary school. No, football was the most popular in the secondary school. So Sakshi, you're a lot of inaccurate information in that paraphrase, in that overview. So that's not going to help you get a good score. So what I would recommend is, like I did, just draw the little letter H and the little letter L's to help you organize what information you want to put in the overview. At the moment, you're probably trying to do it in your head and you're getting a little bit confused. And then the information you're writing is not the same as the information in the chart. And that's not going to help you get a good score. So that's not a great overview. But of course, you know, everybody's making mistakes. We just learn from those mistakes. So, you know, don't be too disheartened by that, but do acknowledge, you know, what your mistakes are, how you made those mistakes, and then just try not to repeat them again. Call cab. Hi, call cab. The table illustrates the number of students in a primary school and a high school in Malaysia, and then you need a comma, while the pie charts illustrate the survey outcomes of the students' favorite sport in 2005. So not best sport, but favorite sport. First the primary school, then the secondary school. Yes. So Selene is responding to my question here. How will we organize the details paragraphs? I think that is the most logical way to organize it for sure. So that makes sense, Selene. I like it. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this information. Primary school. And the primary school again. So it will be all of this information, and that's going to be our body paragraph 1. So that's my next task for you. I want you to write body paragraph 1 about this information up here and this information here. I agree with you completely, Selene. That's the most logical thing to do. And then the second paragraph will be about the secondary school. But don't worry about that for now. What I want you to do is I want you to write body paragraph 1 for me, or details paragraph 1 for me. Share it in the comments. And again, I'll have feedback for you then. Okay, good job, Selene. Domenico, overall, the data reveals that a higher number of students attended secondary school compared to primary school within the given time frame. Good. Moreover, it is evident from the pie charts that tennis was the most preferred sport among students in the primary school, as opposed to the students of the secondary school, the students in the secondary school, and then we'll just say who opted for football, who mostly opted for football. Okay, so that's actually very well written. Just a small little bit at the end where you need to change the grammar. But yeah, very good. Apollyon, hello to you. Welcome to the lesson. Okay, Ruth, overall, what's your punctuation there, Ruth? You need capital letters, you need spaces after commas and full stops. You need a full stop at the end. Okay, overall, the secondary school had the highest number of students, comma, while tennis was the favorite sport in the primary school, comma, whereas football was the most significant, just the most popular in the secondary school in Malaysia in 2005, full stop. Now, the way you've used while and whereas isn't appropriate. So what I would do here is go, overall, the secondary school had the highest number of students, full stop, delete the word while, and then go, tennis was the favorite sport in the primary school, whereas football was the most preferred in the secondary school. So the coherence and cohesion score would be affected by the way you've used while and whereas inaccurately. But the information is appropriately selected. So it's a good answer in relation to your task achievement score, but those mistakes would hurt your coherence and cohesion score. Leongina, what kind of information should we write in body paragraph 1 and 2? So in body paragraph 1, we're going to talk about the number of students in the primary school and the percentages that each sport had, again, in the primary school. So all the data for the primary school. So there are 5 percentages in the pie chart. All of those would be in body paragraph 1, and the number of students, that would also be in body paragraph 1. Focusing on the table first, it can be seen that noticeably more students took part in the secondary school. Well, it wouldn't be to take part, it would be to attend. So attended the secondary school, in contrast to the primary school, consisting of 91,000 and 73,000 students respectively. I wouldn't use respectively here. I think you've already kind of talked about the first one and you've talked about the second one. So I just include the numbers next to it. This isn't the structure that we would want to follow, though, because if you're talking about the table first, well, then what are you going to put in the next? So is that the end of your first paragraph? And then the next paragraph, you're going to deal with all 10 percentages. It's going to be pretty uneven. So you're going to have the first paragraph there, like the one you've just written. It's quite small. And then the next one is going to have to be very long because you've got so many things to write about. So generally, kind of separating them into kind of roughly having half and half the information is more logical. Tummerbeck, whereas football was the most popular sport in the secondary school. Okay. So this is coming back here. The table and pie charts in combination show how many students studied at primary and secondary schools in Malaysia. Then, where's football? So it seems like it's part of your overview. Tummerbeck, what I'm wondering is maybe your comments aren't sharing with me. The last comment from you I saw was this one, where you were writing the paraphrase, and this seems to be part of your overview. So I don't think it looks like I'm not getting all of your comments. So, based on what you've written, it looks like the end of your overview and it looks okay. The whereas should be used to connect the two sentences together. Sorry, the two clauses together into one sentence. So that would be a small W for whereas with the comma before whereas, not after. And you spelled the word school incorrectly. Hi, Salik. Good to see you here. You like the lesson? Good. You're very welcome. Hi, Eving. Good to see you here too. Okay. So we'll just wait on somebody to share the first details paragraph, and we'll have a look at that, and I'll have feedback. So yeah, I'll just give you a minute or two to complete the first details paragraph. Okay. Audio Fiction Joe, back from the dead. Good man. Good to see you here. According to the table, it is evident that a higher number of students attended secondary school with 91,000 in strength, while the primary school has 73,000 in strength in Malaysia. This in strength, I would remove that, but everything else looks good. But I'm not sure what this is supposed to be. For paragraph 1, we're not going to talk about the secondary school. We just want to talk about the primary school. So I'm not sure what part of the essay this is. The analysis from the chart project is to talk about the future, like to predict. So this isn't a prediction, it's based on 2005, so we already have that data. The analysis from the chart shows that tennis is the most favored by the students at primary school, whereas the secondary school students favored rugby among the available sports at their schools. So if this is an overview, you're going to get a band 5 for task achievement, because you shouldn't put the data like 91,000 and 73,000. That doesn't belong in the overview. So I'm not sure what part of the essay you're sharing with me, but it doesn't look like an overview and it doesn't look like a body paragraph. So perhaps you're just not sure how to organize the information. So you can just follow this lesson and you'll learn by watching what we're doing here. Okay, Ruth. In 2005, tennis had 40,000 and was the most significant, followed by football, which was 40,000, 40%, followed by football, which was 30%. However, students involved in basketball, swimming, and rugby was 15%, 10%, and 5% in Malaysia. Despite the primary school had 73,000. So despite doesn't make sense in this context. The percentages wouldn't. I mean, even if there were only 100 students in the school, that wouldn't be despite. So despite is like, something unexpected happens. That would be despite. You're making a lot of punctuation mistakes. So capital letters, spaces, commas, full stops. So punctuation is definitely an area for you to work on, Ruth. Spaces, I can't remember if I said that, but spaces too. And the other thing then is you have to give the context. So I'm after reading all of this here, and I don't know, I do know because I'm following the lesson, but imagine if you just gave me your essay and I couldn't see the question. I have to read all of this before I find out that you're talking about primary school. So setting up the context, are you talking about the primary school? Are you talking about the secondary school? put that at the start of the paragraph so that the reader goes, they know what they're reading, they know why they're reading it. But if you don't tell them until the end, they kind of have to wait, and it feels like they have to remember all that information before you tell them what you're talking about. So start by making it clear at the very start. In 2005, in the primary school, and then you go into, tennis had 40% and go into it like that. Have you said? Cab. Generally, more students attended the secondary school compared to the primary school in the period, in the period shown. However, tennis was the favorite sport in the primary school, while in the secondary school, football was the favorite sport. Okay, yeah, so overall, that's really good. But instead of saying generally, use the phrase overall. Just use that phrase overall. That's the convention. That's what the examiner is expecting to see. So when I read the word generally, I'm not sure if I'm reading the overview or not. But if you start with the word overall, I'll be 100% confident that I'm looking at the overview, and there'll be no doubt about that. Okay, so then in terms of primary school, so let's say in relation to the primary school, in terms of is used in a different way. It's not used like this. So in relation to the primary school, the percentage of students who participated in tennis was about 40%. No, the question isn't about the percentages of participation. It's the favorite, So like, let's say, for example, just to show how they're different. Let's say somebody's favorite sport might be football, but they might not play it. They might just be watching it on TV, or they might be just watching their friends play. So, the difference between participation and your favorite sport aren't the same. But also, I might be playing basketball and football. So I might be playing two sports, but then my favorite is basketball. So the relationship between your favorite and the ones you're participating in, they're not the same thing. So you've kind of changed the meaning by changing the language here. So the percentage of students who preferred tennis was about 40%. Now, was it about 40%? Well, it was exactly 40%. It was exactly 40%. So you don't say about when it's exactly. So it was 40%. While football had approximately 30%, making it the most attended sport. So you're saying that football was the most attended sport at 30%, more than tennis at 40%. So that's confusing. Which is the most attended? So if you're trying to say tennis was the most attended, you have to put making it the most attended sport after 40%, not after the description of football. About a quarter of the students participated in basketball, while rugby and swimming were chosen by only a small fraction of those who participated in other sports. About a quarter for basketball. So let me just quickly look here. Basketball was 15. So no, that's not nearly a quarter. A quarter is 25, so it's quite far. That would be considered as inaccurate. And then you said a tiny fraction for rugby and swimming, but you actually need to give us those percentages. Tell me exactly what the percentages were. You don't just want to say generally they were small. I need to know. So put in the exact percentages from the chart. The other thing then, Selene, is you're missing the information from the table. So the number of students is the other thing you're missing. And there are some errors when I copy my writing. Yeah, no problem. I'm just going to point out the errors that I see. And if some of them aren't relevant because, the way you copied it over from where you wrote it, that's no problem. I mean, you know what mistakes are relevant and you can use those to improve. And if some of that feedback was based on mistakes that you wouldn't normally make, then you don't need to worry about them. Dilshad. Looking at the data on the primary school first. Looking at the data about the primary school first. In total, 73,000 students attended the school in 2005. Good. In fact, no. In fact is more, I'm telling you something that a lot of people believe, and then I want to tell you what's true. Then I'd say in fact. In this case, in fact isn't appropriate. Tennis turned out to be the most favorite sport. Just say tennis was the favorite type of sport for most students, making up 40%. Which was 10% higher than the second highest category, rugby. Good. I missed favorite type of sport. No problem. Okay, yep. So that's good. Obviously, we're not finished, but that's a good start. And then you need to give me the percentages, the other 3 percentages for the other 3 categories. Okay, Domenico. In 2005, among primary school students in Malaysia, tennis accounted for the largest proportion of sports participation, with 40% of students choosing to participate in the sport, making it the most popular choice. You're repeating yourself quite a bit here, Domenico. So tennis accounted for the largest proportion, making it the most popular. The largest proportion, making it the most popular. There's no need to say that twice. And then you're talking about participation. So the largest proportion of sports participation, choosing to participate. So again, those 2 things, you've mentioned both of those pieces of information twice. So to reduce the amount of repetition, and as well as that, that's only 1%. So you need to give the total number of students and the 5 percentages. So there are 6 pieces of data that you need to include in your answer. But you've written, I don't know, maybe about 20 words for just 1 piece of data. You can't have that many words per piece of data when you need to write about, in total, 12. So in this paragraph, it's going to be about 50 words, and you need to include all 6 pieces of data, but you've used about half of the words for just 1. So how are you going to get all the rest of it into the small number of words you have? So when it comes to the fact that you only have 20 minutes to write your essay, this is too many words for 1%. Okay. Football closely followed with a participation rate of 30%. In contrast, basketball, swimming, and rugby had comparatively lower participation rates with 15%, 10%, and 5%. And you need comma, respectively, comma, among school students in Malaysia. Okay, yep. So you're after squeezing them in. Yep, that's actually much, much better here. And the last thing then, Domenico, is you need to give me the total number of students in the primary school. Tummerbeck, in detail, not S, in detail, the highest percentage of 73,000 students in the primary school was for tennis with 40%. A space after the comma, a space after full stop. This was followed by football being favored by around a quarter of students. Football with around a quarter, well, 30% is quite a bit higher than 25. So I wouldn't use a quarter in this case. Okay. Selen, you're very welcome. And Chung, should we compare the 2 pie charts, or is it possible to achieve 7 by analyzing each pie chart separately? Well, I don't know how you would compare the 2 pie charts. It would get messy. It would get messy very quickly. So what would you say? You'd have to say, like, what would you say? Tennis was the highest in the primary school with 40%, while football was the highest in the secondary school, also with 40%. The second highest in the primary school was, what's red? Football with 30%, whereas the second highest in the secondary school was basketball with 35%. So we're not really getting a clear image of, like, how would you compare it in a way that feels logical? Comparing the highest with the second highest, the third highest, like, how are you going to compare it? Or are you going to go sport by sport, in which case the percentages would be organized very illogically, in that, like, you're not really comparing like by like. Football, let's say a basketball was 40%, no, tennis was 40% in the primary school, whereas it was 15% in the secondary school. But you're not getting a feeling for, which was the most common, second most common, third most common in each school. If you're going to organize them that way, you're kind of losing that sense. So I don't No, I don't think comparing the pie charts would be. I can't see how you would do it in a way that would be logical. Maybe I can't see it, and if you can, then it's fine. But generally, because they're different sets of data, I mean, it's related to the most popular sports amongst different groups of people, but I don't see how you would compare them in a logical way. So for me, I would say don't do that. I might be missing something. There might be a logical way that I haven't noticed, but no, I generally wouldn't recommend it. The other two sports, so you need a comma, basketball and swimming, comma, were the favorite of 10 to 15% of students respectively, while only 5% of students preferred rugby. Yeah, good. I mean, compare each category. Yeah, it wouldn't come across very, very well, I'd say. Yes, that's what I mean. Hee hee. Okay. Cowball, cowcab. In the primary school with a population of 73,000 students, tennis is the favorite sport with the highest percentage of 40%. So to be the favorite sport and have the highest percentage is the same meaning. So we don't need to say that twice. Comma, while rugby had the lowest percentage of 5%. So what you're doing now is you're going from the highest to the lowest. That's not going to be as logical for your coherence and cohesion score. What you've done is you've gone the highest and the lowest, and then you're going to go second highest, third highest, fourth highest, which would be more logical if you went highest, second highest, third highest, fourth highest, fifth highest. So go big to smaller, 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 not big to smallest to second biggest to third biggest to fourth biggest, so you're kind of mixing them up, and it's not going to be as easy to follow for the reader. So I wouldn't recommend that approach. And 10% for swimming, 15% for basketball. Oh, no, sorry. So you had 30% of students prefer football, 15% prefer basketball, and 10% prefer swimming is how you would organize that. Okay. Sedidol. Overall, the information above collates that. No, collate is to put the information together. So no, it would be a person would collate, not the graph. So overall, I just removed that bit, the information above collates that, I delete that. Overall, in 2005, tennis was the favorite sports activity, just the favorite sport. Students got interested in, no. And you need to tell me where was tennis the most popular, in the primary school or in the secondary school? Furthermore, the primary school had 40%, while secondary school also had the second highest, which is 15%. So I'm not sure what you're talking about in the second sentence. What sport are you talking about? And also, in the overview, you shouldn't include specific data like 40% and 15%. So a few mistakes there with that one. So a few little mistakes you can avoid there. Set it all. Okay, Dilshad, moreover, while the least percentage of students chose rugby at a tiny 5%, that's informal. We can't use informal language like tiny. There was a 5% difference in the shares of students, in the percentage of students or the proportion of students, not shares, in basketball and swimming, with the former being higher, 15%. So you've kind of created a bit of a math puzzle for me there. There's a 5% difference in shares in students of basketball and swimming. So I know either basketball is higher than swimming by 5% or swimming is higher than basketball by 5%. I'm not sure which one is higher. And then you're telling me with the former being 15%. So now I know that basketball is 15%. So then either swimming was 20% or swimming was 10%. So what you've made a little math puzzle, but it feels like I'm missing one piece of information to solve the puzzle. So much better than that would just be tell me exactly what the percentage was for basketball and exactly what the percentage was for swimming. Because I know, like, it says make comparisons where relevant, or you're trying to make it so that your writing isn't so basic, or you feel like it needs to be more complicated to get a good score. But ultimately, the goal here is you're trying to communicate with the reader. And if you're creating math problems where the reader has to, like, get out their calculator, try and put the pieces together and go, oh, okay, that means basketball was, 20%, or that means swimming was 20%. Well, that's not very good communication compared to just saying to the reader swimming was 20%. So, think about the impact that you're having on the person who's reading your writing and try to make it as clear as possible for them. Okay, I have 2 more comments here, and then I'm going to finish up for today. Body paragraph 1, the number of students which was asked about sport favorite 75,000 individuals. No, it's not how many was asked, it's how many were at the school. While rugby is the least popular among the pupils with 5%. So the information isn't accurate because of the vocab mistakes. So that's something to be careful with there. Will repetition of prefer not affect vocabulary range? I mean, if you have other ways to say it, that would be better. But yeah, you vary your range of vocabulary, but not at the risk of being unclear or the grammar being inaccurate. So if you need to use the same word several times, just use it. And if you have a way not to use the same word several times, then do that. But don't force yourself to make mistakes. So if you've used the word prefer 5 times and you're like, I can't use it again, I've used it 5 times, this is terrible, you're doing the wrong thing. If you need to use it again, use it again. And if you know a synonym with the exact same meaning, use that. But don't force yourself to make a mistake because you're afraid to use a word 6 times. If you need to use a word and you don't have another way to say it, just use the word. That's the best thing you can do. Yes, I did some math there. Come on. How can I get your sample answers? I'll be posting this on my website. It'll be later this week. But if you go to my website, there's like, the heading across the top, the menu. Just go to Academic IELTS Task 1, and you'll see there's a list of sample essays there. So you'll see a list of sample essays, and I'll post one for this probably Saturday or Sunday this week, I'd imagine. Okay, guys, so that's everything we have time for this week. If any of you are looking for one-on-one support, there's my email address. Make sure to reach out. And I believe that's all for this week. If you want to sign up for my free live feedback lessons, the link is in the video description. And otherwise, best of luck with your tests. Talk to you next time.